Next, the shroud image is a scorch from a heated statue. Well, we've already challenged that in that last part of the presentation, but let's talk about it. Stirp determined that if cloth had been heated enough to scorch it, there would be changes in the structure of the flax fibers and the blood, and there was none. Kinetic studies support a low temperature image formation process. Remember, there are many documented scorches on the shroud to compare to, and Stirp studied them in great detail. So the places on the shroud where the scorches crossed over water stains, image, or blood gave the chemists and the physicists ample opportunity to analyze that and determine that paints and pigments couldn't have been the case, nor could a scorch be the solution. And Joe Nickel proposed that theory. However, he is a former stage magician and not affiliated with any scientific or academic institutions. He's not a scientist. Nickel did not provide one example of a scorched image on linen. A scorch would not have the same chemical and physical characteristics as a shroud image, and Nickel's results were never published in any peer-reviewed scientific journals, just a TV show. So, you know, we're not doing science on TV shows yet. So, scorched linen will fluoresce under certain types of UV illumination. Stirp found that the scorches on the shroud fluoresced as expected, but the image itself did not. In fact, it actually inhibited the yellow-green background fluorescence of the cloth, completely eliminating heat as a possible image formation mechanism. And you can see slight red fluorescence in the areas surrounding the scorches and one of these 1978 Vern Miller UV fluorescence photographs. It's a little hard to see here, but there is a reddish kind of halo around the scorched areas, and there were plenty of them on the shroud to use as control samples. So, but look at the hands. The hands don't show any of that, and if anything, they block the yellow-green background fluorescence. So, I just said that, okay. So let's go to the shroud image is a rubbing of iron oxide. Let me show you a couple. There's an original image drawn by an artist on newsprint using iron oxide and collagen dust. Then that newsprint was then laid onto a linen fabric and rubbed against it to transfer the image. And this is the photographic negative of the resulting image on linen fabric. Now, this was done by Dr. Emily Craig. And I will say this is the closest anyone has ever come to capturing some of the spatial properties in the shroud, but there's a very valid reason why. It should be noted that Dr. Emily Craig spent the first 25 years of her career as a professional medical illustrator before going on to get her PhD in forensic anthropology. So our artistic skills when it comes to drawing human anatomy are superb. I don't know if you've ever seen medical illustrations. They're photorealistic. They're superb. They're beautiful. And Emily Craig was a master of this. Emily then spent considerable time studying the properties of the shroud image, including the spatial or topographic data encoded into the image density, and was able to partially replicate it in her results. However, no medieval or first century artist would have had her artistic expertise and knowledge of anatomy, and would certainly not have had the shroud image itself to use as a reference like Emily did. It's an interesting theory, but virtually impossible. Now, this is another iron oxide theory. In October of 2009, Luigi Gallischelli, an Italian chemistry professor, announced that he had reproduced the shroud using simple methods and inexpensive materials available in the 14th century, same age as determined by the infamous carbon dating. Well, that's very nice of Luigi. By the way, I don't know if I even said it in here, he contacted me. I didn't know who he was. He said he was a chemistry professor. And so I gave him high resolution photographic images, digital files that he could use as a reference. And he actually aged his linen and washed in water. And he used red iron pigment, iron oxide, and applied it to the body. Then the linen cloth was laid on and rubbed over the body's prominent features. Blood stains, burn holes, scorches, and water stains were all added afterwards for final effect, although Stirp concluded the blood was on the cloth before the image was formed, not afterwards. And he used my photos as a reference. So let's talk about this iron oxide. In this series of 78 photomicrographs, various shroud image areas are shown at different magnifications. See if you can find any red iron oxide particles. First image is as small at the back at 32x. And then we go the shroud image at the tip of the nose at 64x. I've already shown you this one before. Again, you can see the yellow fibers, but you don't see any particulate matter. This is the shroud image at the heel of the foot at 50x. Again, you can see the yellow fibers, but again, no particulates of any kind. And iron oxide, you would still see millions of iron oxide particles embedded in the fibers. Remember, this is fibrous material. So if you apply particulate matter to that, it's going to embed itself deep into these fibers over time, and we would see millions of iron oxide particles, yet virtually none was found. Now, although Emily created an interesting image, it was 100% red iron oxide with cobalt and other elements. The shroud image doesn't consist of any. Also, she never addressed the blood stains. STIRP data showed the blood somehow inhibited the image formation mechanism. There's no image under the blood stains. An artist would first have to apply the blood stains forensically accurately on the cloth and then paint the image around the blood stains. Well, that's just nonsense. Nobody could do that, even today. So Garlish-Kelly is the fourth person in 30 years to propose the image was created by iron oxide. STIRP determined by multiple tests that iron oxide did not constitute the image. STIRP data is directly from the shroud. His image did not have any true spatial or 3D properties like the shroud does. And he ultimately admitted he put the blood on after the image, unlike the shroud. And he also admitted he had not duplicated the serum halo that exists on many of the shroud bloodstains. So again, you can make something that looks like the shroud. I mean, there are plenty of photographs now of the shroud on the internet to use as a reference. And if you look at the two, I mean, the one on the left there, I'm sorry to say, looks more like a cartoon than an actual image of a human being. After scientific review and direct consultation with Garlish-Kelly, Thibaut Heimberger concluded the properties of his image remain, in fact, very far from the fundamental properties of the shroud image. And again, there's a reference to that. You can find Thibaut's article on shroud.com. It's interesting to note that Garlish-Kelly's claims were made public just before the 2010 public exhibition of the shroud. It's not a coincidence that similar claims have occurred every time the shroud is publicly displayed, and assuming that they are going to display it in 2025, watch how many books come out and how many skeptical claims are made just before the public exhibition. That happens every time. This claim, Italian scientists reproduced the Shroud of Turin, was made only by a press release to the Reuters news service and stated that more proof would be made available, no proof would be available until next week. Yet it got immediate global coverage in over 350 media outlets. To my knowledge, his work was never published in any credible scientific journal. LG's efforts were paid for by an Italian group of atheists and agnostics, so we can really reasonably conclude it was agenda-driven. They had an agenda. You know, when people talk about the STIRP team and accuse them of being a bunch of religious fanatics, listen, if the STIRP team were a bunch of guys from one organization, that could have been plausible. But we represented 20-some organizations, so no one organization could have influenced everybody else. So that means that STIRP could not have been agenda-driven because we were too diverse. No way. Anyway, scientific rebuttal of Garlish-Kelly's claims was quickly available, yet remains basically unreported in the media. And here's the article, Various Stains. Again, I've shown you this one before. And no evidence was found of the body image of any added substances that could have contributed to the yellow color of the fibrils that form the image. The blood images on the cloth are made of blood. The data taken together do not support the hypothesis that the images on the shroud are due to an artist.